All right, good afternoon guys. Welcome back to the channel. It's now Saturday the 20th of February and just after 12 noon, a little bit late start to the day. I think what we're going to do this morning, I just said afternoon. What we're going to do this afternoon is we are going to do a little quick cut and buff on the two rear shelves of the trunk boot. Just to get rid of a little bit of overspray mist for some clear coat. Because I want to try to get that rear panel installed, and I may as well actually do the little cut and buff area before we do that so I don't spray polish everywhere. I'm also thinking of putting some little strips of carpeting in the corners. This one had little pieces of felt. I understand that's not stock. My TR6 actually had them on there as well. They're just kind of finisher pieces for the bottom of the wheel wells. So I think I have some underlayment type style carpet that might work well there in that corner. Some of you might recall that I actually have a metal plate that goes on the rear cover of my gas tank versus the traditional fiberboard style. So I've got a much more substantial rear plate here, and it's going to be quite difficult to get it in here without scratching things up, and I'm getting good at scratching things. But I think it would also help having that carpet base there to keep that metal backing from rattling against the bottom of those lower wheel wells. So I think the carpeting might be a little bit beneficial there. So we'll start the day off with, like I mentioned, just doing a quick cut and buff on this, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little discussion about the gas cap, and we'll orient that in the correct way. Alright, that's looking a little bit better, a little shinier back here, good enough for the boot, the trunk area anyway. So we're just about to move back to the gas cap location discussion, and yeah, it was lots of comments on my TR250 and TR5 Facebook group. I think we're up to about 35 different comments on location, and it seems like there are many different ways to run this. Lots of guys are running it exactly as you see it. Some guys are running it, as I'd mentioned yesterday, some guys are running it on a 45. I think there's actually a standard Triumph technical bulletin that says to run it this way. Thanks to Drew Holiday for posting some excellent materials to share with the group. I am actually going to position it this way so that when I fill the gas tank I can actually be on the driver's side of the car, and I can just flip it up that way. So we are going to locate that there, and we'll fasten the clamp, and we will be done with it. This is that underlayment material I was talking about. I've just gone into the house, so it's fairly thin, and I should be able to go around the curve of that bottom wheel well. So we're going to cut a piece and see if I can mold that in there so that it looks good. If I can do that, then we'll go ahead and we'll affix it to the bottom of the wheel well with some adhesive. But let me cut this up first, and like I said, we'll see if we can fit that in there and make it look half decent before we apply it. Alright guys, there are the pieces that are going to go in the corners. I've got one for the right side as well. So we're going to get some adhesive out, and we're going to stick those in there, and then we're going to put that in eventually. So yeah, not everybody's cup of tea. This is my carbon fiber faux painted rear panel that's going in the trunk. So we'll put that in after we affix these. We'll get the harness fitted, and then we'll figure out how we're going to get that thing in there. That's about 18 gauge steel, so it's a pretty heavy piece, and going to be lots of potential scratching from those feet on the bottom. Anyway, it's got to go in sometime. Alright guys, to hold this back panel in, the previous owner had used screws through these locations here, and I've just increased the size of them a little bit so I could actually get a Rivnut in there, and we're going to be bolting these in. I think that's a better solution. So if you've never seen a Rivnut gun, this is what they look like. These are the fasteners over here, and there's what those look like. These are M4, I believe. Yes, M4 size, and I just happen to have a corresponding kit of fasteners, stainless steel fasteners, that I can use to affix that back panel, along with some washers and lock washers. So we're good to go there. So let me set you up, and I'll show you basically how this tool works. All right, here we go. So you've got your Rivnut tool, like so. Then you've got your Rivnut that you actually thread on to the tool, and it's a reverse thread, so you just thread that on here. All right, then you take it and you put the tool in the, with the Rivnut attached through the hole that you've created, squeeze the trigger, and that's going to create a bulge behind the back of the Rivnut. Once it's in there, you basically screw it back out, and the Rivnut's affixed. So we'll do one more. Thread that on. I think you can see that hole over here. Put it in. Squeeze. Remove. And then you've got your fastener standing by. That should just thread nicely in there. Bob's your uncle. Alright, I've got a few more to do, and then we'll run the wiring harness. Alright, we've got the new rear harness unpacked for the TR250, and I'm just laughing because I've unpacked this box that I've had since May the 2nd, 2011. So I actually find it funny too. I actually purchased this and I'd forgotten about this. I bought this from my my buddy Phil J from the Six Pack Car Club, and here's Phil's old card, and sent me a nice little note. Charged me 20 bucks for this in 2011. I thought it was a pretty good deal back then, so I'm thinking it's a pretty good deal now. Anyway, we're going to put it to good use, Phil, and we'll finally get it on the car. So let me bring out the old harness just to compare it, and we'll see if we can figure out how we're going to run this in the rear of the car. Alright, let's have a look at this. Oh, what a mess. So this is the original harness from the car. I showed it the other day, and I don't know if I showed a close-up or not. Let's see if I can get this in the view. But it's seen better days. I can't believe the previous owner was actually running with this harness in the car. You can see the bare wires there. So there's a quick close-up of the old harness, and I can't believe that the previous owner was running with this harness in the car. That looks like it had some pretty serious heat going through it. Lucky it didn't have a fire. Anyway, we'll strip this down a little bit and we'll get to the rear harness and we'll have a look at that. Alright, pretty simple rear harness on the TR250. I might even be able to figure it out. This is the connecting block that hooks up to the main harness in the kick panel, front driver's side left bottom, and runs along the sill and gets back to this area here where it branches. And this apparently, it's always a good idea to label these, as I have. This would be the driver's side tail lights, and then this branch here where it branches off, this goes across the top of the gas tank. That hooks up to the gas tank, and then this goes over to the left side rear taillights. So yeah, not too difficult, this harness. I'm just going to compare the new harness, make sure it's got the identical connections, and I'm sure it will, but we'll check it while it's off the car just to make sure we don't run into any gotchas. Alright, just a quick tip as we are about to start running this wiring harness that looks good. We've already got to push through the back. So we're at the tying stage, and if you see, we've got the, you can see this guy here, the wiring harness tab of death. So obviously that needs a little piece of something on there to prevent chafing into the harness. From the factory, these came with a little piece of plastic or nylon covering those, and a lot of times they're missing or they need to be replaced. So there's a couple different options, and what I normally do is I will use heat shrink tubing. So in this case, these ones are already pre-cut and even fairly, well, you can get them color coded if you want. So those fit on there like so, and you can shrink those right on there. Or if you prefer, this is a little bit more economical, you can buy full rolls of this stuff and then just cut it to size and shrink that on there. So we're going to do that before we start hanging the harness, just to make sure everything is insulated and protected well. Alright, this next part I'm not going to film because it's going to be tricky and probably frustrating, so I'd probably not prefer to have the camera on me. So apologies for that. So I've got the harness run across the tank, and we've got the gas tank, fuel tank sender connections hooked up. And the panel actually has 2 holes for the harnesses to come through on each side. So that's why I need to put the panel in, so I can run the harness through that panel and upwards to both sides. So like I said, we'll probably tape this area off, get some towels, and we'll see if we can slide and bend this thing to make it fit back where it came from. Alright, here goes nothing. I might actually even crack the paint on this since I have to flex it. But we will see. Alright guys, there's the finished product, and I think it looks pretty good. I'm sure it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I like it in particular. Carpet corners turned out perfectly, the Rivnuts worked perfectly. So we will now finish running that wiring harness, and we've got those holes up here in the corners to be able to run the harness through. So should be able to do that. We've got a hole over there on that corner, so looking good. So we'll finish running that wiring harness through where it needs to be, and then we'll move on to something else. Alright, last update on the trunk boot area. So I've got the wiring harness pulled to that point. I may have to pull it a little further. We'll have to wait and see how long the leads are on the tail lights. And I've got the other harness pulled here. Now that may be able to go back, which will allow me to pull that harness over that way a little more. So we'll see when we get to installing the tail lights, but the harness for all intensive purposes is run, and I'm happy. I also put the floor plug in over here, so that's looking good. I think I might go and get the trunk board. Since I have it up in my storage, I may as well go grab it and bring it out. So I'm just taking a quick look at the clock out here in the garage, and it is almost 4 o'clock. So I've spent the last 4 hours just putting this panel in and getting that rear wiring harness run. So takes what it takes, but just thought you'd like to know that's 4 hours just to do that. Alright, let's unpack another big piece. Had this for quite a while. This is from the Roadster factory. Part number 812236. Cover assembly spare wheel. Hopefully it's in good shape, because I haven't opened it and it's not returnable now. Let me grab a razor blade and we'll get that open and get it on the car. Alright, here it is. Really nice quality actually, very well built. So Comes with the little pieces of leather for the snaps, and the snaps are here and need to be installed. Let me see if I can get you. So there they are there. Nice felt backing on the legs. Anyway, let's get it on the car and we'll have a look. All right, there is that cover installed, and I'm extremely impressed with that. Fits very well. Like it's nice solid construction. So I think I mentioned that this car did not come with one, so that's why I've purchased it. I suppose I could have made one, but in reality, the cost of this, I'm just looking at the invoice, and I purchased this back in 2018, paid $159 for it, so that's actually not too bad in my mind for a fairly substantial piece that's well made. So looks good. That finishes off the trunk area nicely. Again, we'll probably get a piece of carpeting for that to go on top of that, so when we put all our junk on there we won't scratch up that panel. But yeah, I'm thinking that completes the trunk area nicely. So let's move on. Let's do something simple next. I'm not even sure if they still make these, but there's the tag actually from the bag from the Magic Carpet Factory, produced by the Roadster Factory. Part number 812236. All right, I said simple, right? So there's our newly painted overflow bottle cap. So we're going to find a grommet for that, and we'll get that installed. All right, the cap is now on the overflow bottle, so guess we got to move on to something else. So maybe I'll take a look at doing the heater box now, see if we can get that installed. Some of you might want to know how the heater actually attaches to the bulkhead. So there is actually 4 fasteners. So there are 3 fasteners on the top, and I'll show you them on the car as well. These are all rubber buffered, so those are all in place. There's one other fastener location which is here, and this also gets a rubber buffer in place, as well as a large washer, and there's actually a stud on the bulkhead that utilizes a nut and a lock washer. The others are captive threaded nuts, so all you need are the actual hex screws, a lock nut and washer for those locations. So I'll show you where they are in the car. Again, this is a little difficult if you're trying to renew your heater and your dash is still in the car. It can be done, but it can be difficult. So there's the stud that I was talking about right there. You can see that. And then the other locations are up here. So one there, one down there, and one up there. So those are the locations that you need to get to be able to get the heater box in and out of the car if you ever need to do a heater box core repair or exchange. That's what you need to do. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but there's a foam seal that goes on top here, so we're going to add that foam seal on around here, and then we'll mount it up and attach it to the car. Alright guys, the heater box is now in, and that actually wasn't too bad. The reason being, one tip, you can kind of hang it a little bit on that stud. It won't stay there, but at least it'll prevent it from falling. So if you start with this stud first over here, it's a good starting point. Then you can actually push it up to the top and then get another fastener, and you can see the foam up there being compressed, so that's looking good. So another job down, and I guess it's about time that we start looking at the front wiring harness. That runs in behind here, runs behind the heater. You can see the tabs there for the harness that will run to the right side of the car. So it's probably about time we get ready to get into that job. Alright guys, I'm not going to keep you here while I clean up the new harness and retape it, but I thought I would lay out the old harness just to give you an idea of how the harness branches out and off. And I've kind of got it laid on the floor as it would be assembled in the car. So I'm not sure if there's any value to anybody, but let me go through this quickly. If you're not interested, you can just fast forward it through here. But so basically, let me go on the other side of here. So this would be the under dash piece. So here, this big cluster here in the middle would be where your gauges are. So that's where that part of the harness would go. This piece here, that would actually go to your solenoid. All right, so that would go in through this bulkhead, or come out through this bulkhead hole over here. See those round holes there by the actual solenoid? That's where that harness would come out. I don't want to confuse you here, but just thought I'd show you where things go. The outer part of this harness is actually connections for the overdrive, and I believe it's connections for the flasher and the washer motor pump on the very end of this. So those connections would actually come through the bulkhead beside the washer bottle. So that's the right hand side of the harness. Again, back to the bulbs in the center, okay? Come over this way, and here, this connector here would be where the rear harness hooks up. So that would be in the footwell here by the bolts basically for the front body mount, close to there. So the rear harness would hook in there, okay? Then this would come out through the firewall, through the big hole in the firewall, and lead to the front of the car. So that harness, or that piece of the harness, would come out down there in the big hole under the clutch slave, or the clutch master. So that's where that harness would come out. So, following along, then you get into your relays and your fuse box and your flasher. So we'll have a little bit more of a discussion about this area of the car because I've cut some of this area out to fit my duct, fender vent ducts. So anyway, the relays would actually go on this shelf here. The fuse box would go around this area here. So relays here, fuse box here, and I think the flasher unit would be somewhere around here. Either that or the hazard unit, I'm not sure what that one is. So that's where those would go. So we're there. Now we follow that up a little bit further. This branches into a fairly substantial brown wire. I believe that is the alternator wire. So then that would hook up obviously to the alternator. And the plugs are back here on the back of the alternator. All right. So that's about where that ends up. And then the rest of the harness goes forward. And then these will be for headlights, I believe for horns as well, and for external lights, marker lights. So that would be the front of the harness, which would run along here under those tabs there. Should be a ground tab here as well, I believe, somewhere along the front, because I believe there's a grounding wire somewhere on here. Anyway, we'll find it. So that's the basis of the basics of the front harness. I guess it doesn't look too bad when it's laid out in that fashion and when you've done it before. And like I said, it's always nice to have the old harness for reference, so you can sort of see where, if you've labeled it when you took things out, you can sort of see where things run. I've done a couple of harnesses, so I'm kind of familiar with it, but the 250 is a little bit different. It's actually a little easier than the later TR6. But anyway, I thought I'd just give you a quick layout of that on the floor so you can see how complex that looks to you or how basic that looks to you. I guess it depends on what you're used to working on. All right, we'll call it a night out here, guys. Like I said, I'm just going to spend some time wrapping that harness and going through the connections and checking and making sure everything's okay before we start getting that in the car tomorrow. So we'll leave you here, and we'll upload this for tonight, and we will see you tomorrow. Thanks as always for watching and subscribing. See you tomorrow.